All right, you've been watching the show. You know, we've been spending a lot of time talking about swing states in our series Battleground 2020. But our next guest is conducting a series of focus groups featuring the voters in parts of the country that had heavy swings in support for the presidential nominee of one party to the other party between 2012 and 2016. And he talks to them about the issues that will impact their decision this election. It's called the Swing Voter Project, and the man conducting the focus groups is Rich Thau, who's the president and founder of Engages. Rich, welcome back to the show.
Great to be back. Thank you.
All right, so tell me, what are you learning now about these swing voters in each of these swing states?
Well, the big takeaway is that across the upper Midwest and counties that flipped from Obama to Trump, roughly two-thirds of the people we interview of the Obama-Trump voters would take President Trump over former Vice President Biden in a head-to-head match.
The funny thing about, but is that so? Look, he won Michigan by 10,700 votes. If you're only winning two-thirds, is that enough to keep carrying the state, or does they need to be worried about that other third too?
Well, from the Trump campaign perspective, that one-third is a pretty big drop-off. And of course, they're not the only people who might vote in this election, right? You've got an entire state of people who didn't vote before on both sides who might step up. So we really don't know. To me, the thing that's important here, Sean, is that these swing voters are a bellwether. And I like to go back to the old Margaret Thatcher quote, which is first you win the argument, then you win the vote. And with these swing voters, President Trump is winning the argument and likely to win their vote.
You know, Rich, we hear President Trump often talking about the silent majority. Would you say that it exists?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I would tell you, in interviewing these people, there's no silence. They are extremely expressive. And, I come from the East Coast. People are very expressive here. They're always telling you what's on their minds. And people in the Midwest tend to be more salt of the earth, a little bit more reserved. When I talk to them, wow, they're like a grenade with a pin pulled out. They are just about to go. They have a lot to say. They've got a lot on their minds, and they are highly, highly engaged.
Do you think, I know this is a tough question to answer, but when you see some of the spreads in the national polls or in some of these battleground swing states, do you look at them and say that's about right? Or based on what you see in your focus groups, you think it's probably a little bit closer?
Well, first of all, everybody's asked me what's my prediction for November. My prediction is it's going to be close. I'm not saying who's going to win, who's going to lose. Too many variables involved to be able to make any sort of prediction. I think it's crazy to make a prediction, frankly. But the thing I will say is that you don't know what turnout's going to look like, and you don't know whether the issues with you were just talking about with mail-in ballots is going to affect things, with how much COVID and people's willingness or lack of willingness to vote in person is going to affect things. So there are too many variables there. It's impossible to know.
You know, a new CNN headline shows that new polls suggest Trump's position has stabilized a bit. What do you think that the Trump campaign needs to do to capitalize on some of these learnings that you've found?
The thing I would say that the Trump campaign needs to do is to have the president get off of Twitter for the next 90 days. Because the number one complaint these swing voters have is that he's in their faces too much. And the more he recedes, the better off he's going to be.
It's interesting that you brought that up because if you recall last cycle, for the last almost month and a half, he was very disciplined with what he said, how he said it. He did no interviews. He focused on rallies, and his tweets were really tame. It sounds like you're saying he should do the same thing he did in the follow-up to 2016.
Yeah, the more he recedes from the background, the better off he does with these swing voters.
So let me ask you a question. When you go to these different places, right? So you go to Michigan and Pennsylvania, whatever. Are there different themes that come out of different states, or is it pretty much synonymous among the swing states, swing voters in the swing states, what they care about?
It's pretty much the same. I think what they're concerned about really is the theme of America being put first. It's one of the things I've come across. I've done this now for 17 straight months, once a month. And what people care about is immigration. They care about trade. They care about America not being taken advantage of. That's one of the key themes I think that I've seen universally across all the locations that I've studied.
You know, Rich, you started this project over a year ago. Have you seen what people care about change in light of recent events with COVID and social unrest?
Yeah, I would say that one of the things that they do care about, obviously, is the breadth and depth of the COVID problem. And where the president has lost support is among people who have suffered COVID loss in their family. We had one woman, for example, in the focus group we just did in suburban Detroit in Macomb County. She said she was with Trump 100% until January. She said she was all in. And then after COVID hit, members of her family got sick. She lost faith in the president. And she decided that as the lesser of two evils, she would vote for Joe Biden. So that, to me, I think is a very important thing for the president to keep in mind.
Was there something that she said the president could do to change her mind?
Yeah, I think it is basically show for her, the word she used, I remember very clearly, was empathy. The president, in her mind, does not show empathy. And she and her family are suffering, and she's not getting empathy from President Trump.
So that's a really interesting point that you make. What could he do, or how should he do that? That is not something he's prone to do. We've talked about that before on the show, in terms of both race and other stuff, that showing the concern is sometimes almost as important as the policies that you're enacting. So what does he need to do? Go out there and have groups, or start hugging people? Or, I mean, look, what is it that he could do to get that message across?
Honestly, Sean, I'm not sure at this point in the race that you're going to change the behavior or attitude of a 74-year-old man. Anymore, you're going to change the behavior or attitude of the 78-year-old he's running against. I think this is pretty much baked in terms of personality and approach. And you're going to lose some people based upon the president's track record and his behavior, and based upon how Joe Biden behaves in the campaign and his track record and his behavior. So,
Rich, real quick. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we just asked our last guest about this. Do you think that this lawsuit against the NRA is going to have any effect on people who care about the Second Amendment or guns?
Yeah, honestly, I think people who care about the Second Amendment, for whom that is their top issue, they're likely to vote for President Trump in massive numbers. So I'm not sure whether some event that's taking place in early August is going to affect people's vote in this campaign. The NRA, because of the situation they're in, has been having issues in terms of their ability to mobilize people politically, and we've seen that in the midterm elections. I think that's going to continue. So, yeah. If you're going to vote, if it's your issue, you're going to vote for President Trump.
That's right. Okay. Rich Thau, thank you for sharing with us these amazing insights you have into swing voters. I'm sure we'll continue this conversation as we head into these final 90 days.
Thanks so much.
All right. Got some great news for you. Next week, we're going to launch our special series on China called The China Threat. We're going to take a deep dive into the communist government's aggressive approach to undermine American democratic values. We kick it off Monday with a huge guest, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Experts Gordon Chang and Jim Carafano will also join the discussion. You're not going to want to miss this. All right, Club for Growth is spending heavily on campaign ads attacking Joe Biden for opposing school choice. We're going to talk to the group's president, David McIntosh, about that strategy next.